Good evening and good to have you with us on this special broadcast that we're bringing to you, the Budget Roundtable. There is no point for guessing that this time the budget, we hope, is going to be unprecedented. It's been an unprecedented year, the kinds we've never experienced or seen before. We've gone through a double whammy of a recession and a lockdown on a pandemic. And we are hoping that what Nirmala Sitharaman delivers with her budget on February 1st is actually the start for a new India. But unlike the usual conversations, many of which you often see even on the urban debate, this series of conversations are going to be different. We will try, first of all, to not get technical at all. And if we do get technical, we're going to try and explain it to you. These budget roundtables are going to be conversations that all of us ideally have in our daily lives about our jobs, our money, our businesses, our banks, the state of our healthcare, the state of our education, conversations you and I on a daily basis have with our loved ones, family, friends, and even our colleagues. Today we are going to start off with a focus on employment, or rather unemployment, as a big question mark and a big crisis in our country. So day one, we're going to be talking about jobs. Tomorrow we're going to put the spotlight on healthcare. We all know we have an abysmal healthcare system in our country, but the pandemic has put the spotlight on this issue like never before, and we need to now wake up and do something about it. So what can we expect from the budget is going to be the question. On day three, on Wednesday, it's going to be about your savings, your loans, and of course the banks that you transact with. How stable and how safe are your savings? What can be done about your loans? Can the budget really do anything? That's another question. On day four, it's all about agriculture, farm to fork. Amidst the debate over farm laws and the massive protests that are taking place in our country, we're going to talk about what can the budget and finance minister do to ensure or to help over 50% of our population that in some way is connected to agriculture. And on the final day, on Friday, in the run-up to this special series and the run-up to the budget, it's going to be the money show. Your money. How much more can you get this time? Can you expect to? What can the budget do to ensure you have more money in your hands? Are you investing right? All about taxes, simplified and decoded. And I will emphasize on this again and again, that this will all be simplified for you to understand without the jargon. And that's why we have a very special panel. We have our own in-house experts who've covered business, who've covered budgets for a really long time. And we've got two external experts also joining us every day to help you understand it. So let's say good evening to Vinay Tiwari, our managing editor, who has decades of experience in covering budgets from the 90s itself, and the big bang budgets of the liberalized economy happened right up to now, and the hope for a new India, this budget. Good evening to you, Vinay. Let me also say good evening to Anupriya Bahadur Nair, senior journalist. Anupriya has done her master's in economy and very specifically microfinance. Anupriya has also been a TV business journalist for a really long time before she decided that she's also going to simplify economics for people at home. So she's now raising two bright minds, and unlike the kids you would usually see around, these two children are well versed with technology and economy already. Yes. On this side, we have Avni Raja. Of course, everybody knows Avni, who's a big face on our channel. Avni and I go way long back because we both started off in business journalism. And Avni is our actually in-house expert even for personal finance, right to the point of us asking her what forms to be filled, when do we have to fill those forms, what kind of regime, income tax declaration regime, Avni, do we need to opt for? So all of those questions is where Avni comes in. And let's also say good evening to Sriram Iyer, editor-in-chief of Business Insider. Sriram's worked with brands and organizations like CNBC, Reuters, Quartz, and is now trying to do, and is successfully doing to some extent, something different with a very small team that he has for Business Insider's India Digital Portal. So everybody here actually believes that we must explain economics and business like a simple thing because it impacts all of our lives. But let me start off with you, Vinay. Why is it that you believe that this budget, we are hoping for something for a new India?
Well, I mean, we call it a new India purely because we want to be optimistic.
Yeah.
Not everybody is optimistic about the situation that we are in. But I also believe that this particular budget is not about the fact that we have new problems. I think we've discovered that we always had those problems.
Yeah.
The pandemic just kind of made it look more stark.
Yeah.
And I also believe that when you're rock bottom, the only place you have to go is up. And if the government misses this opportunity, probably we would have missed a golden opportunity because nobody's going to blame them for anything. Look at the situation. You don't have any data benchmarking that you need to worry about because there is no data, frankly, to benchmark yourself against, right? Which is one thing that the government is a little squeamish about in the past.
Yeah.
You have no real expectations in terms of coming up with something dramatically outlandish, so to speak. You have, a situation where any bold decision, no matter how crazy it may sound, will be looked upon more positively because it will help if it helps kickstart or at least recoup whatever you lost in the last year.
Right.
And you have a situation where people are so desperate that they'll probably settle for anything that looks like a positive story.
Right. Well, one point that you raised actually is already giving me nightmares that we don't have anything to compare it to. Yeah. There was a big budget announcement last year as well because we were going through an economic recession, economic downturn at that point of time, and everybody was hoping that the government will come out with a set of announcements that will help us. And then came the pandemic and the lockdown, Anupriya, a series of announcements that have happened since. Nothing that the government announced then is actually now to be compared to.
No, but I'll go back to what Vinay was saying, and that's a very critical point, that there is no playbook.
Yes.
The good thing about this government is this budget could have very well been the budget that they needed to announce this year after the year we were having when the last budget was announced.
Any which way.
Any which way.
Yeah.
What the pandemic has done, I mean, you can call it, dramatically a silver lining. It's not really a silver lining, but it has given the government the opportunity to do dramatic things without taking the heat of it. In any other year, you would have had, economists throwing these numbers at you, this fiscal jargon coming your way. This time when the government comes up and wants to increase spending and wants to throw money into the economy, nobody is going to question it. And it's going to be welcomed, as you were saying. Right. It's going to be welcomed. It's going to be welcomed across the board without the critics. Because I think at this stage, nobody wants to be a critic because everybody needs and wants the new India that you're talking about.
Some hope. Some bit of positive news, and almost even the economists, everybody is saying, yes, spend money. Go ahead and borrow more.
Exactly.
Borrow as much as you need. But just give the money to the people.
I mean, coming from the regime where we were talking about having, the era, as you recall, about this is what we're going to do for fiscal dependence this year, these numbers. And it was going by number to number. Now it's about the real economy, for once. It's about looking around and saying, your unemployment numbers of December are out. There are X number of people out of a job. And this is worrying. And this is the big worrying part. People who want to find jobs are not finding them either. So the real economy and not the number economy will be the focus, hopefully, this time.
And Tanvi, I don't want to put a dampener, be the person who puts a dampener on things.
Go ahead, be the party pooper.
Finance Minister has said this is going to be a never-before-seen budget.
Yes.
And expectations are already sky high. In as many words,
yes.
in quotes. And expectations are already sky high. So she sort of fueled those expectations. What is the government really going to do? And, if it doesn't sort of deliver even to some extent what people are expecting, that, in my opinion, is going to be, worse.
I want to say that Avni, just clarify, because I've known Avni for a very long time, she's not a party pooper, she's a party planner. So she is already planning on behalf of Ms. Sitharaman. So, but if Ms. Sitharaman holds herself to similar standards, this is going to be much bigger than what you're talking about.
So we are trying to tell everybody right now why this budget is going to be important, or why Nirmala Sitharaman is going to be the most important person in our lives in a week from here on. Why is that? How do you explain it to people who shudder at the thought of math or economy, Sriram?
So, making business relatable, economy news relatable is my only job. I'm not an economist. So I explain to people the way I understand. So I think the first thing I want to say is for young people to take interest in economy news and business news and the budget particularly, I want to just throw a headline out there. Just remember that every finance minister is a millennial. Don't explode, stay with me. I mean, if I'm calling Manmohan Singh a millennial, I have thought this through. So give me a couple of minutes. So every finance minister is a millennial because they spend way more than they make. Yeah. And more importantly, like they, it's not like accident. They plan at the beginning of the year, they say, I will make 10 rupees, I will spend 15. Yeah. That's classic millennial. Don't go by how they look and all that. Number two is, they have a lot of lofty ideals. They want, like clean bathrooms, make the environment better, gender equality. But all of these lofty ideals can be forsaken when it clashes with the party. So the two people mean two different things.
I want to take offense to the fact that you said lofty ideals to some of those things.
Two different things. Let me just finish this thought. Two different things when they mean party, but party comes first. So all of these ideals can be forgotten. The only reason why a finance minister is cooler than any average millennial is because they have a borrowing target.
Yeah.
If you can't plan your spending, please plan your borrowing. If in my 20s I had a borrowing target every year, I would have an IPO today.
But millennials don't need a borrowing
No,
target. They just have to go up to their
the
parents
one
and say, I
difference-
need the money.
No, one difference which he said, you're right, they're millennials.
Yeah.
The only difference is that, unlike millennials, we expect them to know why they're overspending. Millennials
There's
sometimes
some
have not a clue why they're
accountability.
overspending.
You think they have a clue? Okay. Awesome.
That's what I'm saying. I'm not too sure of that. And that's where the crux of this budget is going to be. That as long as we know which direction we are overspending, we are fine.
Well, the other aspect, of course, is that there is unemployment that impacts youngsters as it does any other age group, working age group. And if you look at the statistics that are coming out, we don't have too much coming from the government's end, and that's been a problem for a while now. But if you see CMI's latest data as well, according to CMI, we saw a 6-month high when it came to unemployment in the month of December. So actually, if you see the charting of the plotting of the chart from January, February, then the lockdown months was obviously where it peaked, and then it began to improve as we started opening up our economy, and again it's now gone up for the month of December. Now, according to CMI, a lot of this is happening because the labor which is there in market is out looking for jobs, and they're asking for jobs because the manufacturing companies aren't hiring as much, and agriculture, which is the other big segment that hires people, is also not able to do so much in the month of December. It's not part of their agricultural season. So that hiring is also not taking place. But that being said, data-wise, let's just talk about what we see around us and the kind of job losses or salary cuts that we've seen in the last 1 year.
Can I just come back to that chart for a second?
Yeah.
And we talked about decoding and simplifying everything. So everybody looks at an unemployment rate and talks about the unemployment rate going up or down. The actual number to watch is employment rate.
Right.
What happens is we talk about how many people don't have a job. There is also a large pool who are looking for a job and who get dismayed and stop looking for a job.
Correct.
That in the jargon way is called the labor participation force.
Right.
What has happened in India in the past 6 months is a large percentage of people have stopped looking for work.
Yeah.
But if you look at the employment rate, which is if 100 people are coming in to look for a job, how many are actually getting a job? It comes back to what Vinay was saying, that this problem has been persisting. That's why we need the new India. 2 percentage points every year, from about 39% of an employment rate, we're down to about 37 now.
Yeah.
So it has been a steady decline in the employment rate, not the unemployment rate, which fluctuates greatly because of how many people are in the market.
Out there in the market looking for
and
a
the
job.
worrying part is people are giving up looking for a job because they have zero hope
And
in
most of
getting
them
a
are
job.
women.
Yeah.
No, and
Most people dropping out of the labor participation
Mostly
are women.
because of work
and
from home as well.
Particularly since
Yes.
we're talking about this lockdown, essentially the worst hit section of the society are women who were otherwise employed at the start of it.
One quick thing to add to what Anupriya said, it's not just about, the numbers don't tell you the full story, also because the quality of the employment has also declined.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I may be doing a job which is like 3 skill sets lower
Yes.
than what I would have otherwise been able to do because I haven't found anything and I'm so desperate that I'm just picking up anything.
Yes.
So nearly 50% of women who lost their jobs at the beginning of this year, between Jan to March, and right in the first month of the lockdown, have still not found a job back. And it's not like they're out of the, and some of them might now drop
Not
out and
find a job.
Yeah. So, and that's a pretty sad state of affairs when you are trying to talk about some of the lofty ideals that I spoke about.
Okay, we're going to come back to this specific issue, especially in the unorganized sector in the labor markets in just a bit. But I want to actually put the focus first on the salaried class. And in big cities or even in towns, the salaried class, which has also gone through a tough year. People have lost jobs. Those who've managed to stay on and stick on to the jobs have had to see salary cuts and had to face the challenge that any time they can lose their job. and they've had to realign themselves, they've had to upskill, multitask, do whatever it is needed to do to continue having a job. But Vinay, that's actually one of the biggest trends that we saw in the year gone by.
That's right. And I think one other important thing, and I hope again that on February the 1st, they don't paint everything with one brush. Even the fact about not finding a job for the salaried class is not universal.
Yeah.
Corporate salaries or people who are employed in corporate professions have one set of problems.
Yeah.
The small manufacturing, the SMEs as the government loves to call them, have a very different set of problems. The whole migrant workforce that was casually employed, but maybe employed in a way that they were getting salary in a month, have a completely different set of problems. Then there is this interstate problem that we've now discovered, which is a third kind of a problem. So you have multiple problems. It's not just one salaried issue. And each one will obviously have a different expectation. I mean, people like us in our newsroom, we might just only look at the income tax slabs going up or down, but that doesn't solve the problem of 80% of the other workforce.
I pray to anyone who's watching this, please go beyond income tax on budget day because it matters. Let's put it this way. Can I just take a slight detour with your permission? Essentially, if you're watching on the budget day and the only thing you care about income tax, it's fine. That's what you've been told so far. And I think people like us are guilty for being, you're so boring that you never, don't want to hear anything else. But think about it this way. If on the budget day, Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman says that I'm going to spend X amount of crores additional, give the government banks more money to upgrade their technology or allow for more fintech startups. It is very simple. You're an engineer, you're looking for a job. These are the places to look for.
Yeah.
Don't just go aimlessly on a wild goose chase. That is the most important sort of, as a job seeker, this is an important information for you, not just income tax. You don't have no income to pay tax. So first get a job, then worry about the income tax.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, job loss and or unemployment or even having a job of your choice obviously continues to be a big issue, and it's been even before we went to the lockdown. But I also want to pull up some of the other statistics. If you are wondering that you missed your appraisal cycle last year, and if you're going to be getting something this year because you've worked so much through the year, even if it was from home, here is what it looks like. Now, first let's look at what this survey specifically talks about in terms of appraisals that happened in the year gone by. 29% companies didn't give any appraisals at all. 9% recruiters said that they gave actually appraisals in the bracket of 0 to 5%. And that, this is as much of the hike that they gave to people. If we move on and say 46% actually opted for 5 to 10%, a lot of this actually came in the later half of the year as well. And some said that they gave more increment. 16% said they gave increment even more than 10%. But is it going to get any better? A little bit, yes, as per this Aon salary trend survey. In the next year, 14 companies may not give any increment at all. 14% companies won't give any increment at all. 10% recruiters say they are planning to maybe give a 0 to 5% hike. That's pretty much also barely any hike. 61% of the firms have said in this survey that they are planning to offer 5 to 10% increment. So not so much coming in as better news. Now, unless Finance Minister comes up with a big bang package that really turns around our economy overnight, this is how it's looking as far as corporate India is concerned. Corporate India, Avni, managed to sustain this year only by cutting costs. A lot of it was, of course, fixed asset costs, but people cost. And they managed to cut down on salaries, on number of people, and that's how they profited.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's really what's going to be the sea change going forward, because what this year has done is taught corporates to be, more cost efficient, realize that work from home doesn't mean a loss in productivity. So their whole way of thinking, the way they're going to look at future hirings, who they're going to hire, what roles they're going to hire for, all that is probably going to change. So we really don't know how much, these increment forecasts and the way corporates are going to be thinking going forward is going to sustain. How different is it going to be? And that's going to be a real game changer.
In the spirit of simplification, since you used a jargon, let me simplify that. When you say fixed asset cost, that in many ways is a big conundrum because that adds to unemployment. So if, for instance, companies have given up an office because they want to save on real estate expense, it means the security guard there has lost a job, the housekeeping there has lost a job, the administrative support services for the building have lost the jobs.
Yes, absolutely.
So it's a bit of a
I think that is
the fleet guys who are bringing them to office or picking them up and dropping them have
for every kid that is not going to school or every 40 kids that are not going to school, There is one school bus driver whose job is not, and this is and they have in fact mobilized themselves into some unions, and they are now demanding some, and it's a very important, because these are the people that you trusted your kids with.
Yeah.
Now, how can you forget that they need to survive as well, and they have kids now? And the most important thing
but
is,
cost has not come down. What hurts the common man at this point, you're saying they've lost their jobs, but at any point, the cost of education, as the only unemployed person on this panel and not monetarily gainfully employed person on this panel, the cost of everything, the cost for the average man, or the cost of education, as you're saying, has not decreased. There could be cost efficiency, as Avni is talking about, but that has only come for the top corporate.
Yeah. Yes.
It has come at the cost of the smaller guy.
Yeah.
Across the board.
Exactly. That's
that is
precisely the
again,
point.
okay, now I'm going to throw some number because I'm a business journalist. So if the last quarter earnings at the end of September, the revenue for all companies fell 7%.
Yeah.
But their operating profit, or EBITDA, as they call it, I mean, EBIT is the operating profit, before Anupriya stops. The point is that the earnings were up 16%.
Yeah.
Where did it come from? Cost optimization, which means more people lost their jobs.
Correct.
So Sensex might be cheering. What corporates need to realize, and what the government also need to realize, that the cost of these job losses and the salary cuts is the same. They are your consumers.
Absolutely.
They are not going to buy your stuff, and that's going to be a problem later.
So that is the very problem. The problem is going to come that you're only looking, even as you talked about Sensex, you're painting the brush for only that 1,500 listed companies across the board. The ones who are actually feeling the heat are the SME and the MSMEs who are not being able to take on anybody because they don't have the bandwidth to be as cost efficient.
Yeah.
They don't have it.
They
were given some
everybody.
PF relief even before the pandemic, that the government will come in 26th March. I remember last year the government said we'll come in and start giving PF contributions if you're 100 employees or less. Even before that, if you recall, the government had sharply cut corporate tax.
Yeah.
None of that translated into better wages. It just meant better optimization and better balance sheets.
So before we move on to the next segment, I just want to quickly put in a thought here and see what all of you think about it. Can we not have a system in place where the government says, okay, I'm going to give you a relief package. I'm going to come up with these schemes to help your business in this sector and that sector, provided you don't start firing people and you keep on people. Because at the end of the day, it looks like the profit books are looking much better for many corporates because they've cut down on costs. A relief package will come from the government, which just means better business for them, but they don't have to go back to hiring those many people.
There is a playbook available for this, which is your US Paycheck Protection Program. And in fact, we at Business Insider had written about this right in April, only to realize later that it was not practically possible in India. Otherwise, it's a great thought. Basically, if you have, you are eligible for stimulus, tax breaks, etc., whatever it is that you want as a corporate, if you have the same number of employees and the same employees between March and July or September, right? So that's the deadline. Then the government foots some of your bill. Now, this is something that's already happening in the US, can be replicated in India. Unfortunately, we need to be a little innovative about it because we can't track, like Anupriya mentioned, MSME employees. Somebody who's, sort
formalize them, say the number of
The
PF accounts that you
is too
open.
large. It's just too large. There's a data problem.
So just to
It's
add
too
to
large.
the, in fact, economists in some part off record government sources are already indicating what you're saying. Two things. One is an urban employment guarantee program that's being talked about. And the other thing that's being talked about is an innovative solution, quote unquote, is that the companies or the individuals be allowed to not give their share of PF and the government offsets that to the corporates.
Which happened at the MSME level. Which happened at the MSME
Because remember,
level.
the question that she asked was important. Because remember, if you make it a blanket rule, a lot of the Indian employers are contractual.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, and that creates a problem because if you can't guarantee that, contract employments are fired and hired, especially in the MSME sector, depending on your need. Right now, all MSMEs
No, but
are
for a
working at 60%.
government that from day one has been talking about including more people and formalizing the economy, has been talking about opening bank accounts and tracking all of that. Yes, it will be a data nightmare to the point that you were making, Anu, but you are any which is headed that way. You just push it further and in a faster way so that there is some amount of accountability.
Well, to be honest, to go back to the whole playbook, like he's saying, the US has given them this paycheck playbook. The ideal playbook, which is for this new India startup, is to actually go back into history all the way back to the Depression period, which is 1929. The US again then in 1935 did something called the Big New Deal. And what did they do? The government just spearheaded spending. Because the difference now, Tanvi, is going to happen is demand has to be created. Demand was anyway stagnating till there was no demand. Who is the demand? Well, employed or unemployed, we are the demand. We represent about 5% of the economy, whether we like it or not. We are the 5% of the economy that creates the demand. The demand is already staggering. So you can't expect the government or anybody to create jobs, and demand is staggering across the board. And a simple example of that would be, if you look at car sales. Car sales are up, right? Car sales are up about 7-odd%. Look at two-wheeler sales. Two-wheeler sales in the last quarter are down 15%. So who doesn't have money? The second run, the third run, the fourth run. They
Oh,
have
by the
no
way,
money.
two-wheeler sales are down, but Bajaj reported record earnings last Friday.
That's the point. That is the point. That's exactly the point that we are trying to make.
Caveat, Tanvi, as the only non-financial journalist on the panel, I'm going to take all of you financial journalists on this whole bogey of spending as we go along. I'll tell you why it's a bogey. I'll come to that.
Yes, no, let's go ahead. Let's go ahead and
I'll
say
tell you why
that
it's a
now.
bogey.
Yes.
Because I'm not saying Anu or you or Sriram or Avni
But
do
that's
it,
our playbook.
But by and large, financial journalists see budgetary allocations. They don't see the revised estimates of actually how much was spent.
Yeah,
We've
so-
never spent everything that we've allocated.
This-
I don't get excited by allocations. So if the government tomorrow announces, oh, we've got 1 lakh crore for this, I would much rather see how much they actually ended up spending last year. They never do that. Because the trouble with spending is not the allocation, it's the efficiency of delivery.
Yeah.
And we are awful at that. I mean, please see the number of projects stuck in Bombay, the city where we are in currently, because of a variety of reasons.
The
from
very
activism
bridge
to environment
the
to
very
labor.
bridge I took to come to your studio.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, so, I mean, that's spent, if you may have allocated lakh crores for the infra upgrade, but if all of it is stuck and nothing is moving on the ground, it's of no use. There is no employment getting generated.
So effectively, this for our viewers to also understand, the government comes out with a statement of intent on 1st of February and say that this is an
Absolutely.
amount of money that they're going to spend on agriculture, this is the amount of money they're going to spend on infrastructure, this is the amount of money they're going to spend on education or healthcare, and you know, the next year, while we all get caught up with the new set of announcements, very few actually take a look at how much of what government promised did they end up spending. But in a year like this, or 5 years, 7 years ago, when Anupriya and I were working together in another place,
Vinay's advice
all
is,
of our stories were about how the government's entire plan has gone for a toss because the government doesn't have money. So first they start cutting down on non-essential expenditure, which is essentially to say the extra kharcha that will happen in a government office.
Building new roads. Building new roads.
Printing
becomes-
brochures. They begin by printing
before-
brochures and your travel
before we go into
costs.
something deep, Tanvi, I want to interject.
No, I just wanted to finish this so people understand what Vinay and you are talking about. So they cut down the non-essential expenditure. Then they go on to say, okay, now we will not build as many roads or we will not set up these many hospitals because we don't have the money, and so they cut down on that. So that is a very real issue that you're talking about, which gets even more amplified when we are in a recession.
No, so I'm saying this is a great advice, and this is what we do. Like, I mean, every year there is something called a ticker desk, and we are all people like me and Anupriya in our growing up years. We were like, you know,
We know when what is being announced.
this is the estimate, this was the budgetary target, this was the revised expenditure, and this is the shortfall, and then the market moves accordingly. Now the point is, this year is a very bad time to advise people to look at revised estimates. People who haven't,
That's right, they are.
because it is going to give you panic attacks. If you say I was targeting 3.5% fiscal deficit, I'm going to have 7.5%. Please don't look
But
at
that
revised
can
estimates
brings
this
up
year.
to the first point that you have to start from the blank. You have to go with the
Blank slate.
blank slate at this
They
point.
will go back to reading income
You
tax.
cannot have a versus. You cannot have the versus
You
figure
cannot-
on the
so
So
ticker
this is
Because
the
desk.
comparing
best
it.
time for the government to just go ahead and spend as much as they
Or
possibly
promise
can.
to spend,
Promise
and
to
then
spend.
we see how much of that gets actually spent.
So the
Okay.
spending part is important. Again, tying back to what Vinay was saying, that what is it that the government is going to, what is it that it has the money to spend or it wants to spend? We are pretty much, we all agree that we are in a sick economy right now, anywhere in the world, including India. Let's not get parochial about this. So if that is the case, then we need to do the diagnosis first. What is the level of sickness? Now here we are talking about unemployment, bad data, all of those things. But if you look at the, if you speak to an economist today or a market guy today, he will tell you that it's all awesome. It is way better than I had ever dreamt of.
Yeah, didn't we just 50,000
Market guy, not
on
the
Sensex
economist.
just
Yeah,
now?
market.
I'll be the market guy,
Okay.
not the economist.
Yeah.
As the economy person here, I will
So
be.
they'll be like GST collections at record high, e-way bill like superb recovery, railway freight traffic amazing, Reliance retail posted a record profit. Bajaj Auto posted a record profit. You're just going with all the numbers are looking so awesome, which is why Sensex is at 50,000. The optimism that is there in the market is, like Anupriya says, slightly disconnected from the informal sector.
Slightly,
Because,
I'm sorry, slightly is
I'm
an
saying,
understatement.
okay.
Completely disconnected.
I am an understatement. But having said that, the real economy is not getting captured in this data.
Yeah.
Now, the point is to see whether in the first 15 minutes of her speech, does Ms. Sitharaman acknowledge this fact?
Exactly.
If she acknowledges that fact, then there is a lot of spending coming in the next 45 minutes to 1 hour.
But they have in,
If
in
not-
the
How
run-up
long
to
are you
now,
thinking
right?
the budget speech is going to be?
What do you remember from last year?
Using 45 minutes to 1 hour, I said you're being optimistic about
The
this.
late Mr. Jaitley at least took a break. She didn't. She was like
Rest in peace.
going strong.
But can I just, I'm answering questions, but I want to ask if someone, he's seen the 91 budget. Do you really think the government has the opportunity now to completely do it again?
I really think they do.
And make their mark, because
I
this
really
government
think
wants
they
to
do.
make a
and
mark.
I'll tell you why I think they know. Look, I have always believed, and this is a debate that Tanvi and I have in the newsroom very often with all the other colleagues, that budgets are largely political exercises.
Yeah.
We tend to look at them as economic documents. They're
Which
largely
is why I
political
asked you,
documents.
because this will be their moment to make the mark and change
No,
history.
and the other thing is the political wind is behind the government.
Yeah.
Despite probably the worst thing you could have ever imagined, the political wind is behind them. The Prime Minister's approval ratings are still almost the same. The government enjoys a high level of confidence of the people. Most of the surveys that are coming out suggest that people seem to be happy with the way they handled the problem, despite the misery. And that's a little bit of a mystery to me.
Yeah.
But despite the misery, the people tend to think that this is the best place political party to handle it. If you can't take advantage of this political capital,
Then it's wasted.
then nothing can be said. I mean, you really have to.
So we can go back into history books now, and people will finally, they're hoping, before we
It
start
was very
referring to the
similar.
91
No,
budget.
She gave a
Yes,
great
you know?
example on 91 because this was very similar.
Yeah.
We
She
were,
did
we were
give that
selling off our
example.
gold.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
Chandrasekhar had nearly packed gold into a plane and sent it abroad.
Yes.
Right? To solve our balance of payments problems. Now, you couldn't get worse than that, which is much the same now.
Okay, before we move to the next segment, which is what I promised, that we'll talk more about the smaller businesses, the unorganized sector as well. Very quickly, for our viewers to know this, what is it that the recruiters are saying? Now, this is the Naukri.com hiring outlook survey for this year. 21% of the recruiters say that the hiring will return to pre-COVID levels in 3 months. Pre-COVID levels, which is, by the way, are not a great level to be with to begin with. When we went into the lockdown and when the pandemic hit us, our economy had already slowed down to a 3.5%. So we were already at a very, very bad place to begin with. And now the companies are saying that 21% of them believe we are going to reach that level in the next 3 months. 26% believe that the pre-COVID levels will actually, we will reach those levels in 3 to 6 months. And the largest chunk, 34%, believe that the hiring will return to pre-COVID levels in 6 to 12 months. So we're still some time away from a better environment in terms of people getting a job. But let's talk about the smaller businesses. The larger corporates may be doing much better. The market may be very thrilled about how the profits that bigger corporates are looking right now. But the smaller businesses, to the point that Sriram made, Anupriya, the government has made a lot of announcements. Almost all of their packages have been about either the agriculture and the migrant laborers, or it's been about the SMEs.
You know, and exactly what Sriram said, that you have to listen to this budget. It's not going to be as easy as we are giving money to this and you feel like, it's not going to be like one of those Narega announcements that, we're throwing in 2 lakh crores into the market, or we're forgiving debt, which is what happened with the farmer, the big
Correct.
wave debt. You've got to listen into this budget. So, the constant call from a lot of the small businesses has been to cut the cost of doing business.
Correct.
They said it's become very expensive for us. The bigger corporates can do it. We can't even afford a lot of the tech. So I know for a fact that a lot of them have made representation to talk about reducing the GST rate. I mean, I know we
Yes.
don't want to get into tax rates and all, but reducing the GST rate of adopting new technology. So if an MSME is taking on a new technology, give me some rebate back. Make it easier for me. Apparently, the paperwork on running a small business is very, very extensive, and it's very cumbersome and tiresome. So they're hoping. You talked about small businesses across the board. I mean, just look around everywhere. How many dentists have shut shop?
Yes.
How many parlors? I mean, as a woman, I can tell you how many parlors have just completely stop. Tour and travel is a dead industry for now, unless you're going to Goa and back.
Again,
But
there is data to say that it has seen a sharp recovery
But
in
that's
December.
a sugar rush. Shriram, that's a sugar
I
rush.
know, it's
I
the
call it a
revenge
pure
travel.
pent-up sugar rush the
Yeah.
economy is feeling at this point,
Yeah.
which will all stabilize in 3 months, and then reality starts to sink in as the kids hopefully get back to school at some point, and the rest of us. And then I would like to talk about these recruiters that Tanvi is talking about, and she'll hand me some numbers
that's what I'm saying, right?
because I don't know how real these
Just
numbers
to
are
add
looking.
to a point that she made, because since the viewers would have caught that point, I mean, even though, and she's very right, it's actually a very, very important point, even though the budget exercise doesn't address the GST problem,
Yes.
that's a separate exercise, but
Yes.
already you see a lot of the small scale industries talking about what the economists call the inverted pyramid problem, where some of the commodities, the raw materials taxation is actually more than the finished product taxation. So there is a strange problem that some of the industries are facing in terms of the product they're selling. The demand has gone down for that reason. And that's a reform that the GST Council needs to also do. The budget alone is not going to fix that problem.
But the finance minister can always make an announcement to say, this is our intention, we will take it to the GST
Which is
Council.
what Sriram said. At some point, we need to see her body language. We need to see in the first 15 minutes as she stands there, has she acknowledged the real India? Has she acknowledged the real problem? And then they don't have to say it in the next 2 hours. I mean, it's only for television that we love to hear it for the first 2 hours and, really capitalize on it. But it should be a year-long exercise. I mean, from that point, it should just be the
If you
government's
acknowledge
intention.
the problem, then it's great. And I think even from a corporate India point of view, like for example, I don't want what I'm saying to come across as as something where corporate India and the government and us, we are all not in sync. The point is that if the government acknowledges that there is a vast problem which is not captured in the data, it is good for the corporate India as well. There will be more liquidity in the market. The Sensex will go from 50,000 to 70,000, and everybody will be happy. There is spending that needs to happen this year. And the question again, so I'm guessing that would be at some point your conversation point. I don't want to take it away, but where is the money going to come from? So.
No, actually, I wasn't going to really ask the question because we've already started off by saying, the government needs to borrow more, the government needs to borrow more. The government could have sold.
At this point, nobody cares where the money comes from.
Yes,
they just need to hear Ms. Sitharaman say, I am willing to spend it. And I am going to front end and private sector. I'm going to spearhead the crowd spending. And the others will just join
Also, one of the, since I'm on a crib trip about business journalists, there is one other crib trip that I have is that I think the financial papers that are presented that day over-focus on the central government's role and under-focus on the state government's role. I think they have a huge role to play in what is presented that day, ultimately trickle down to the last person. And you can see this particular pandemic has created a new thing that frightens me. I mean, I think we've already had, caste, inequalities, we have religious inequalities, we have class inequalities, and now you'll have interstate inequalities. There are some states that are going to come out of it better. There are some states that are going to go down in the dumps.
So let's talk about some of these states, because one thing that happened in this pandemic was a large number of people went back to their home states, and not everybody has come back. Few have come back. They are still struggling to find jobs in the big cities. Some restaurants may have opened and they need some staff. Some Ubers and Olas may be on the roads. And I'm just oversimplifying it maybe, but just to make it more relatable.
But I don't think it's oversimplifying. I think that is the reality. I'll give you an example at this point. In hot tourist spots, like Goa is a hot tourist spot right now. People were flooding to Goa over the last 3 months within the Bombay region. There are many places that couldn't reopen because they didn't get staff back.
Right.
They just weren't able to.
Or didn't have enough staff, or even their companies didn't want to get that much.
And also because the government there did not reduce license fee this year. So they were not able to set up again. They have to pay a license fee every year for setting up. And that was not reduced in a year like this. So there is obviously a big disconnect. And at the state level, as Vinay is saying, it's very critical. And maybe so this year more business channels and will get a chance to look at state budgets through the year as well.
We look at it every year. It's just that there is, that storytelling becomes too complicated. I mean, I will lose my audience. Why get there? That's honestly nobody. If people ask for it,
it's not just
I can
it's
tell
not just
you.
about looking at state budgets. I'm also talking about
if states implementing central
reality
schemes.
of every state. Right. So you have a certain environmental reality about, say, Gujarat or Tamil Nadu or Maharashtra. There is also an environmental reality about Bihar and UP and Chhattisgarh. And now you have a situation where a large number of them have actually gone back and are in some ways part of that state's burden system. And Narega is a poverty alleviation program. It's not an employment generation program. As far as
And
I'm
it's a
concerned.
black hole of resource drainage.
Correct.
It's a complete black hole.
Exactly. And it doesn't give you anything more than just poverty alleviation.
So,
It's just
so let me
just
ask
a
this
badge.
question. Why are these migrants, laborers not coming back? One aspect we said was that there are no jobs in the city.
It's the labor participation rate problem. They're not going to find a job.
But do they have
if
jobs
I didn't
back
have a
home?
job-
What is it that?
But if
or
the cost of living
Manrega-
is lower, but the cost of
Manrega
living,
working?
but the cost of living to going back to Jharkhand and living in my home and eating literally the palak that is grown outside my house is still lower than coming back and living in a chawl in Mumbai and paying 8,000 rupees or 10,000 rupees as rent with 10 people in the house with me. I mean, that economics, that basic economics doesn't make sense for them.
Absolutely, that's absolutely
doesn't make
correct.
sense. So they're not
Three
coming
reasons.
back.
One is what she's saying.
And not just the workers. I'm talking about even people who are employed and were living in my own building complex, for example. People who were working and living together, 3 or 4 girls. There was a group of lawyers, somebody. They've all gone back to their hometowns. They're all working from home because they don't want to incur the rent and everything.
In
and they
fact,
all go from
rentals
home.
in some parts of Mumbai have gone down because people have packed up and gone home.
And that's also income for
And
somebody.
these are young working couples.
And in some parts of Goa, it's at 50,000 rupees a month an apartment.
Yeah.
Because everybody who can afford it from Delhi and Bombay is in Goa.
And look at how one part of corporate India is reacting to it. There are already now reports of corporate India introducing differential pay packages depending on which city you're located in.
Right.
Yes.
They've already started talking about that. So one is this, that the cost, of course, of living in your own hometown is much lower, and obviously that's why they prefer that. The other is, we've said this all through the last year, Tanvi, you'll remember this, that this particular reverse migration was also an emotional event for a lot of people.
Yeah.
It's not going to be easy for all of them to forget that emotion so quickly. So it may happen, but it will take another 2 quarters at least for them to forget the pain.
You mean the pain of
The pain
getting
of
back
what
home?
they had to go through. I mean,
No,
you had
honestly,
landlords screaming for rental and throwing them out. You had, employers not paying them money. And
everybody
then
paid an exorbitant price to get
to
home.
get back home. Absolutely.
Exorbitant prices.
Some
Yeah.
walked, some cycled, some hitched a hike, some paid 10,000, 12,000 rupees just to get one truck ride. It was a
So
emotional.
I'm just going to quickly move on to the next aspect that we want to talk about. And Avni, we've been talking a lot about the worst hit sectors and if the budget can actually come up with anything. Now, according to the government, they've already announced stimulus worth 15% of our GDP.
Yeah.
There is some debate there, but we won't get into that. But some of the sectors that we've been looking at, what could be possibly something that the government can do there?
Yeah, I mean, the sectors like we've been talking about, hospitality, tourism, the restaurants, all of them shutting down. And so far, so the key here is not just about government spending, but it is how the government is going to spend. For example, when the corporate tax rates were cut, a lot of people said that, it's not going to trickle down. And that's exactly what happened. It didn't really trickle down except increase the balance sheets of the companies. So that is an example, but we have to see where the government is going to spend, how it's going to spend. And that is what is going to be important in terms of even trying to, it may not sit in, say, every sector, this is what I'm going to do. But the overall overarching theme of what Finance Minister says about the format of spending is going to be important.
But don't they need to say that, as Sriram saying, they need to say that word fintech for it to connect with the real person at this point.
Yeah.
Because if they just announce large
That's
numbers...
okay. If they do it, then what will we do?
There's nothing announced for media, ever. There's no announcements for media, ever.
No, I'm saying
I've listened for many years.
No, I'm saying if they make it very clear, the more boring the speech is and the more boring other publications and channels are, the more good work for me. So, if they say fintech, then I know that. And there is a lot of things that are. I mean, I don't want to come across as someone who's constantly I'm not saying, because the data. Again, you spoke about tourism. I'm just going to pull this up. Travel and tourism sector, the employment fell 5.5 million in the March to April to June quarter. At the end of December, travel and tourism sector had 1.3 million more people employed than in December 2019. So, now I'm just saying that, again, data, I agree with you that data does not capture all of it. But if I decide to cite this data tomorrow and say everything, all is well, you can't question me.
Which actually brings me to the point, I was going to ask this question and see what everybody thinks about it. We are saying, hospitality, real estate, tourism, retail, they're all in pain and the government needs to come out and help. The government a few months ago, their view would have changed, possibly could have changed by now, said that we're not going to come and help the auto industry. They can figure it out themselves. We're not going to step up and help you or give you a package. You look at your working structure and figure out how you want to save your money. Is it required? Is it required at this stage to help some of these sectors and companies and businesses with some kind of stimulus, or do they find their own way?
I don't think they can. I mean, it is a contrarian view to that. I am not a big believer, but the problem of efficiency comes in. But I'm not a big believer in handing money onto sectors.
Yeah.
It doesn't work.
Absolutely.
Can they spearhead projects which will trickle down as more jobs? Real estate is one of those. Urban housing schemes is one of those. So they've got to look at sectors where they can make a difference. They can effectively put that money into a multiplier effect, as they call it, where it multiplies down the road.
So you announce projects
I think
but
that
no
is-
tax relief.
I think that is one point where this government seems to have cracked a code, or at least that's what market wants to believe, which is your production-linked incentive.
Yes.
The point is that, like Anupriya
So
said,
what is production-linked incentive, Sriram, to begin with?
So you can either give me a loan, cheap loan or an interest-free loan or whatever, to set up a plant, set up an office, set up a production facility, or what I will do, and I will do if I can. If I didn't have an Aadhaar card, I would do it. I would take that money and disappear, do something else, right? But what the production-linked incentive does
Dear
is...
director, please keep the disclaimer at the end of the show ready. Views expressed here.
No, but that is the point, right? I mean, that's what people did. You give them, that's one of the reasons why the textile, and I'm not coming up with this. This is some, Nilesha, one of your guests in recent time, he mentioned this, and I'm just quoting him here. That is why the textiles package failed. Because they gave loans to people to set up textile units. People gold-plated it. They said my machinery.
Upfront loans don't work.
It doesn't work.
Upfront loans
So this government seems to have cracked that, and they are saying that, you know what, you show me the orders, you show me that you're producing, take the money, deliver those orders, and you get the cheap
So
loan or whatever.
essentially, do
Kaam
your
karo,
bit
paisa lo.
and then
Exactly.
we will do
Kaam
it.
karo,
Correct.
paisa lo.
Kaam karo or paisa lo. Do your
मतलब
bit and then
factory
we will
लगाने का
help
पैसा
you.
नहीं मिलेगा, factory
One other
चलाने
thing
का
that I
पैसा.
very strongly believe in, the trouble is that you can't just look at sectoral allocations and think it's good or bad.
Yeah.
The government also needs to see the entire continuum chain of that sector. For real estate, for instance, it's not enough to say, okay, I'll give a relief to the real estate sector. Can people actually afford to buy a flat? That's another big question, right? People are not willing to buy a flat, maybe, because the banks are not passing on the rate cuts that the RBI is giving them. I mean, how much of the RBI has gone, what, some 4 or 5 cuts, all of you would probably know, and see the amount that they passed on. It won't work for you unless you bring that credit cost lower, or down the line, then of course, make the input cost for all the real estate developers to come down, plus solve the massive litigation process that is currently completely stalled the sector. It is not just a problem of allocation. The sector was already under huge stress.
Correct.
And there is litigation virtually everywhere. I mean, it's held up everything.
This is real estate.
It's real estate because it's one big employer. that's
Litigation
what
is
we're talking
everywhere.
about.
Everything's stolen.
Everything is litigation.
Everything is stolen.
That's why you have to ask.
There is no slowdown for lawyers.
No slowdown. Corporate law is absolutely no slowdown.
For sure.
So see, this is a good thing coming out of a budget discussion. You know what you want to be if you're in class 12 and wondering
I
commerce
think
or
12th
science.
is late. I think 10th is where you're looking at it. What stream you're. I think 12th is a bit late now.
Sriram's talking from his own experience and saying maybe 2 years after
I think
graduating from school.
after finishing
still do
my
it.
graduation is when I realized maybe I want to be a journalist. So don't talk about pace to me.
I'm still thinking whether I...
Okay, one last conversation point here is about what this year has taught us, and for a lot of people it will perhaps become a lot more essential going forward, is realigning ourselves to the way businesses work and skills that are required. We came up with a lot of words: reskilling, upskilling,
Multi-skilling.
multi-skilling.
Wow.
Is there a role that the government can play? Like, for example, come up with a completely overhauled Skill India plan, something that is more suitable to the way businesses have now learned to survive.
So, a lot of the CSR program that was announced, in which a lot of companies mandatorily had to do it. If you see, a lot of the CSR programs for the big corporates got focused onto vocational training.
Yes.
So, one of the big banks does this. They've set up a vocational training ground. And if there is a facility being set up, suppose a big, the iPhone guys are coming in and, Foxconn setting up a set. Over the next 2 years, they will train people purely for that. So the company contacts them and they set up a training unit. So these lot of undergraduate and they're from sort of the lower strata of society, they get trained to do the job that is required.
Yeah.
At some point, the government has to re-dignify labor work in India. I mean, we come from a very large informal sector, and we're only talking about fintech jobs. It's a very, very small sector that moves into such posh jobs. The large sector is still looking for basic jobs. I'll give you an example, Tanvi. My help at home, his son has finished bachelor's degree in BCom. Usko office boy laga do. That is, you hear it from every single help.
Yeah.
And I've been trying to convince her, why don't you teach him driving? I will, why don't you teach him some, basic computer work? Skill them.
Yes.
The whole notion of education, which we'll discuss through the days as well, has to change. And the government has to sort of, it's not about setting up more IIMs. It's going to be about skilling the 18 to 25-year-old very differently and changing that
skilling
mindset.
them with the technology perspective is also very important, because how you skill them, what are you skilling them for? Because it's no point teaching some, man how to fish if there's no fish in the sea.
Yeah.
So how you skill them, what you do, all of that is going to be very important as we go forward.
And I tell you what, all these quiz shows that come, these KBC, right, they've destroyed the way we think and everything. We are so excited by the idea we produce the largest number of MBAs and engine doctors.
It's
we are not looking at what kind of quality we're producing.
Exactly.
Yeah, but what are those engineers getting as jobs? They're still lining up to do anything which has nothing to do with engineering.
Precisely. So the person who comes and installs...
And I'm not talking about myself.
Aren't you an engineer?
It's a problem if the person who comes to install your Wi-Fi wire at home is an engineer from a small engineering college. It's bad. It's not good.
So,
and I really hope that the government understands that ITIs can't be about plumbers
But is
and
it the
electricians.
government's onus? Can they start off some programs?
So
or
there
is
is a cultural point here that I want to make, and so there is a quality problem and we face this on a day-to-day basis. And we know this because somebody who, like he said, who's come to fix the Wi-Fi is not doing a good job. We assume he's incompetent or less educated. I mean, which probably is true in most cases. But there is a larger problem in India, which is basically we have two kinds of people who are employed. One who can never be fired. Two who can always be fired. If you have a bad mood, you can fire them. And that other person, if he has a bad mood, he can fire you, even though he's your employee. Now, this creates a problem of accountability. And this is something that I don't think will change in one budget or even 10 budgets. But we need to sort of acknowledge this as a problem, and this is where I think I will be able to get corporates and, the JNU types or whoever, like whatever you want to call it, to agree on this, right? The left, right and center is that we need, for us to provide better services, talent to be more motivated, they need to have more stake in the business. So one of the advices that came from Raghuram Rajan, for example, so everybody, when they talk about labor reform, everybody says what the companies want, I should be able to fire anyone I don't like. The employees want, I should be able to stay there for as long as I want. But there is no ownership on the task, on the business. If that improves, for that, one of the reforms that Raghuram Rajan suggested was increase the severance pay for every employee every year. So your salary might be regulated less, whatever, but there should be enough to lose. Today the farmers are there protesting because somebody put a hand in their pocket, not because they took away something that they didn't have.
You're saying they should make it a setup where there is enough to lose for you yourself to go and upgrade yourself and upskill yourself?
No, I'm saying people who have, I'm not talking about the skilling part itself. I'm talking about the quality of talent. I was responding to that. The quality of talent is also lack of motivation, lack of stake, lack of accountability, and it runs through hierarchies across. And let's take PSU banks, for example. I mean, SBI lunch jokes are hilarious.
But then you're talking about the entire civil service.
No, but I have a slightly different take. It's what you're saying is true, but I very strongly believe that Indian employability problem is about other things as well. Which is
of course, there is.
No, and a majority of one is, of course, we don't look at an education reform exercise as a budgetary exercise. But the fact is, it's linked.
It is linked. That's
it
what
is
I was
absolutely
saying.
linked.
It is. You have to look at it as a holistic. You have to go to education. You got to look at vocational education, because you can't just put people out there.
I mean, increasingly in the modern age, a doctor and engineer needs to be a good communicator as well. You cannot be a good doctor and engineer.
No,
if you
and
can't
to
communicate.
also instill that it's okay for someone to want to be a plumber, or it's okay for it to be a chemist, to go into pharmacy. These are not, but the last rung employment options that are teaching, for example, like skilled teachers. These are employment opportunities. This is where you can move a large part of your youth employment, but there is no there's no emphasis given on it. So these are sectors that the government could effectively look at and build up demand for employability.
Yeah, but correct. So one part is you start from the basics and you say you fix your education. But the other part also is when like we were talking about earlier, take healthcare for example. We were in a situation this time where people couldn't, see each other or meet each other, had to maintain the distance. Doctor, there was, remote diagnosis taking place, remote treatment taking place, the whole concept of telemedicine and all of that. These are new things and now they have become part of our lives. We live and work in a media environment where we literally ran our news channels from home with zero presence in office. That requires upskilling, reskilling, realigning at every single level. So who takes the initiative for IT sector, healthcare?
But you're still talking about the people who already have jobs, Tanvi. Those are not the problem point for this budget. The problem point is out of the 50 crore workforce is the large part that doesn't even have the option of looking at a severance pay.
Right.
That is what she needs to address, not the people who already have a job.
So that was, like I said,
I got the, but I'm saying as important as that is, and it is.
But didn't we decide we're going to fight? Why am I agreeing with you?
What a great note. On that note, completely out of time. Thank you, Director Swati, for rescuing us from what could have otherwise turned into a fight. But it's been a pleasure to have all of you on this panel. Anupriya is actually going to be with us through this week as we bring up other topics. We're going to try and simplify and make it a conversation that you also relate with while we talk about the budget, what could possibly come in the union budget on 1st of February, and how the government could look at solving some of our very basic daily problems that we face. You and I. It's about you and I and the union budget that the government will present on 1st of February. Thank you so much for joining us.